My name's Callum. I used to think I liked working alone. There's a kind of peace in silence when it's just you, the dark, and the hum of old machinery sleeping beneath the earth. But there's a difference between silence and emptiness, between solitude and being somewhere that's been dead for 80 years. They sent me there for a routine survey, another forgotten tunnel from the war sealed since 1944. Just another job. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air felt heavy, like it had been holding its breath all this time, waiting for someone to open the door. And the deeper I went, the more it felt like the tunnel was remembering me, even though I'd never been there before. If I'd known what was waiting in the dark, I would have sealed the gate myself and walked away. But it was too late for that. Chapter 1. The job. I don't usually get sent to jobs with anyone else, which honestly suits me just fine. People are all right, I suppose, but I've never been any good at small talk. I miss punchlines, forget to look people in the eye, and have all the conversational instinct of a damp traffic cone. Solitude has always been easier. The work helps too. I've spent most of my life crawling through forgotten tunnels, inspecting derelict rail lines and sealed-off chambers, anything long abandoned and preferably untouched by sunlight. There's something about the quiet that feels like a favor. I like the history. I like the ghosts of industry. All those relics from wartime days that no one under 60 cares about anymore, they speak in silence. And I guess that's a language I understand. This particular job came through as part of the South Cut Clearance Survey, a network of sealed tunnels under the countryside. According to the report, one of them hadn't been opened since 1944. No one knew what was inside or why it had been locked up in the first place. That uncertainty was reason enough for management to send a surveyor team, and for some god-forsaken reason, they decided I shouldn't go alone this time. They paired me with Dan, early 20s, full of restless energy, the kind of guy who probably couldn't walk to the kitchen without his AirPods in. He talked about UFC fights and vapes and new trainers. Not exactly my type of company, but I've had worse. Once I worked a week with a man who thought Dunkirk was in Germany. Our job was simple enough: document debris, measure clearances, and assess whether the tunnel was stable enough to reopen for a heritage route in the summer. If we gave it the green light, a proper restoration crew would follow. If not, they'd seal it again and pretend it never existed. We arrived before dawn. The air was still and cold, the sky barely turning grey at the edges. Our boots crunched against frost and loose ballast as we walked towards the barricaded entrance. 2 layers of heavy-gauge chain-link fencing sealed the tunnel, reinforced with thick wooden boards and a padlock the size of my fist. It looked like someone had tried to cut their way through years ago. The chain link had been sliced open in places, then hastily patched back together with mismatched wire and rusted clamps. The padlock was newer, but the arch above it, the old cast iron structure, still bore a faint wartime engineering mark. I brushed my gloved hand across the stamp. You wouldn't notice it unless you knew what to look for. We set up our equipment, respirators, headlamps, and radios. Dan checked his phone one last time, muttering something about no signal, like it was an omen. Then together, we cracked open the vent boards and stepped through the mouth of the tunnel. The light from outside slipped away behind us. My torch beam cut a narrow path through the black, the dust shimmering like mist in its glow. The air inside was heavy, stagnant metallic, and sour. Even through the respirator, It felt like breathing through rusted mesh. Every footstep stirred up old soot and grit, whispering echoes into the distance. Dan gave a low whistle. "Bit grim in here," he muttered. "Can't imagine coming in without masks," I said. "You ever heard of the Cross Line?" He shook his head. "Is that like a brand or something?" "Nah," I replied, my voice sounding strange in the confined air. It was the old supply line this tunnel used to belong to. Moved goods between the coastal depots and RAF sites during the war, fuel crates, medical units. They say in March of '44, a Luftwaffe raid hit the southern mouth, right as a supply train broke down inside. Dan's torch beam wavered. "Never heard of that one." "The blast created a vacuum," I said, maybe a bit too brightly. "Sucked a fireball straight through the tunnel while they were fixing the train. No survivors. They just sealed it and moved on. Too busy fighting the war to dig the bodies out." He didn't reply after that, just walked quietly beside me, the crunch of our boots echoing against damp stone. The tunnel stretched ahead, endless and patient. After a while, Dan broke the silence again, mumbling something about a featherweight fight he'd watched last weekend. The way his voice cracked in the dark told me he just needed to fill the air to keep the quiet from pressing too close. I let him talk. It wasn't until much later that I realized how lucky he'd been, having no idea what waited for us deeper in that black vein of earth. Chapter 2. Into the Dark. We kept walking, our footsteps swallowed by the long, steady hum of silence. After a few hundred meters, even the faint memory of daylight had vanished behind us. The tunnel air clung thick to the back of my throat, damp, metallic, and stale, as though we'd stepped into a lung that hadn't drawn breath in 80 years. Dan's flashlight beam danced over the brickwork, jittering with every nervous twitch of his hand. "This place gives me the creeps," he muttered. "Feels like it's watching us." "Old tunnels always do," I said. "They were built to outlive the people who made them. They remember things." He gave an uneasy laugh, like he wasn't sure if I was joking. Every 30 yards or so, the tunnel widened into a refuge bay, small alcoves, where workers could step aside when trains passed. I counted them silently as we went, just something to keep my mind steady. By the fifth bay, the floor began to change. The gravel thickened into uneven mounds, and something metallic glinted among the stones. "Hold up," I said, crouching. The beam of my torch fell on a piece of fabric, half buried under dust and grit. It looked like old canvas, frayed at the edges, darkened with oil and time. I nudged it with my boot. "What do you think that is?" Dan asked, squatting beside me. "Could be a sleeve from one of the workers who sealed this place," I said absently. He blinked. "You're joking, right?" I smirked under my respirator. "Of course I am. Probably just a bit of coat someone left when they patched the gates. Still weird though." Dan frowned. "Feels tough." He poked it with his glove. "Not like fabric. More like..." He stopped. Like what he didn't answer right away. Just stared, his flashlight trembling. "Like skin," he said. Finally. The word hung between us like smoke. I forced a laugh that sounded more brittle than I meant it to. "Yeah, right. Someone lost their arm down here in the '40s, and it's still in perfect condition." "Sure." Dan didn't respond. He just stood up slowly, brushing the dust from his gloves, his breathing heavier than before. "Let's keep moving," I said. "We'll note it for recovery. Probably just an animal hide or something." He nodded, though I could tell he didn't believe me. Truth was, I didn't believe me either. As we went deeper, the tunnel began to change again. Sections of the ceiling had caved slightly, bolts hanging loose like broken teeth. The walls bled with rust streaks of red and brown running down towards the track bed. The deeper we walked, the more the air changed. It wasn't just damp anymore. It was thick, almost oily, clinging to the inside of the respirator like condensation. Every breath felt borrowed. After the 8th bay, I caught sight of something massive ahead. My torch beam glinted off twisted steel. "Dan," I said quietly, "we've got something up ahead." When I stepped closer, the shape resolved into what was left of a freight wagon, collapsed and melted across the rails. The frame was gutted, warped, beyond recognition, one side peeled open like the lid of a tin can. I froze. My throat went dry. This was it, the train I'd told him about. The one from March 1944. Dan came up beside me, his light tracing the contours of the wreck. Jesus. The air smelled faintly of ash, even after all these years. I played my torch across the remains, the corroded metal, the melted rivets, the faint outlines of shapes fused into the siding. At first, I thought they were just scorch marks, but when the beam steadied, I realized they were impressions of limbs, fingers, boots, a face half swallowed by iron. My stomach turned. "Is this real?" Dan whispered. "Yeah," I said. "Too real." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tunnel seemed to hum softly around us, the sound of something settling or remembering. That was when the gravel shifted. A faint scraping noise came from beyond the wreck, soft and deliberate. I froze, my light trained forward. Dust stirred in the beam, falling like ash. "Did you hear that?" Dan whispered. "Yeah." We waited. The sound came again, slow, uneven, like something dragging itself across the ground. Dan took a step forward, but I caught his sleeve. "Don't." He stopped. The sound grew clearer, closer, and then, from behind the half-melted carriage, something moved. It wasn't fast. It didn't lunge. It simply shifted, a pale, wet shape, sliding from shadow into light human in outline, but wrong in every other way. Its skin looked like someone else's, stretched and patchy pieces, hanging loose, as if they'd been torn and reapplied. Its limbs twitched stiff and clumsy, like it was still figuring out how to use them. Dan took a step back, voice breaking. "Mate, what the hell is that?" I couldn't speak. My mouth had gone dry. The thing turned its head toward us, and the skin across its face slid, revealing the muscle. Beneath, raw and glistening. Its mouth opened, but no sound came out, only a wet rasp, like air escaping from a punctured lung. I didn't think. I just ran. The tunnel walls blurred past as my boots pounded against the ballast. My breath came in short, ragged bursts, heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't stop to see if Dan followed. I just knew that whatever that thing was, it wasn't supposed to still be alive. And yet, somehow it was. Chapter 3. The thing in the tunnel. I don't remember when I stopped running. At some point, instinct just gave out, and I dove into one of the refuge bays, pressing myself flat against the damp wall. My heart was a hammer in my throat. I switched off my torch, leaving only the sound of my own breathing, fast, uneven, trapped inside the respirator, like a dying animal's wheeze. For a long time, there was nothing. No footsteps, no scraping, just silence, the kind of silence that's so deep, it starts to sound like a hum. Then came a faint sound, a dragging noise. Something was moving out there, slow, heavy, wet. The darkness was so thick it felt alive. I could sense it, not through sight, but through the air itself. The pressure changing, the temperature dropping. My brain kept whispering, Don't look. Don't look. But my hand disobeyed, reaching for my phone. The dim lock screen glow spilled across the floor. That's when I saw it. The ground beneath me wasn't just gravel, it was sticky. A patch of dark residue clung to my trousers, and when I shifted, it pulled against me with a tacky stretch. I angled the phone light down and froze. The floor wasn't just wet. It was flesh, strips of it, torn, half-rotted, layered like old wallpaper. The skin had been peeled away in ragged flaps, exposing red muscle that glistened in the cold air. I bit back a sound, switched off the light, and pressed my hand against my mouth. Something moved again, closer this time. The crunch of gravel, a faint clink of metal, then that wet, uneven dragging resumed, followed by a sound that made my stomach twist a hoarse, rattling breath, as if lungs that didn't belong to it were trying to remember how to breathe. I dared a glance around the edge of the alcove. The thing was maybe 20 feet away, caught half in the beam of my dropped torch. The light was faint, now flickering, as it rolled on the ground, but it was enough to see. The creature was tangled in steel cabling lengths of it, fused into its body. The wires had melted into its flesh decades ago, leaving deep grooves that gleamed wetly in the light. Every time it moved, the metal tore through its muscles with a sound like ripping cloth. It tried to crawl forward, but the cables held tight, jerking it back. It didn't scream, not like a person would. It just exhaled in broken bursts, as if the effort of existing was tearing it apart from the inside. I should have felt pity, but all I felt was relief, because it couldn't reach me. I started to move slow and careful, crawling toward where my torch had landed. My palms slid over cold ballast, my chest tight enough to hurt. The creature twitched, pulling against the cables. I froze, waited. When it went still again, I crept another inch, another. My fingers brushed the torch just as my radio crackled to life. Southcut control. This is Red Lead. Enemy overhead. Repeat, enemy aircraft sighted. Brace for impact. The voice was old, broken, full of static. A transmission from another century echoing down the wire. The creature reacted instantly. It thrashed against the cables, the sound of tearing meat filling the tunnel. Its limbs spasmed, jerking at impossible angles, the melted wires biting deeper, as it screamed a high animal noise that shattered the quiet. I grabbed the torch and bolted. I ran blind, the light shaking wildly in my grip, beams scattering over brick and steel and shadow. The old message still hissed through the radio, looping, warped by distance and time. Brace for impact. Brace for impact. Then beneath the static, another voice cut through Dan's. Callum. Callum, mate. There's something here. He sounded terrified. His breath came fast and shallow, each word breaking like it was being ripped from his throat. I can't. It's here with me. Dan, I shouted into the radio. I'm coming. Just stay where you are. Don't move, static. Then, whatever's down here. It's not right. Just come back. Come back now. His voice fractured into white noise. I ran harder legs, burning lungs, screaming. The tunnel seemed endless, every curve a mirror of the last. I kept expecting to see that thing dragging itself after me. But all I heard was my own heartbeat crashing in my ears. When I reached the section where I'd left Dan earlier, his tool bag was still there, sitting exactly where he'd dropped it. But there was no sign of him. Dan, I called, spinning in place, my torch cutting frantic arcs across the walls. That's when I saw it. A side tunnel narrow and half choked with debris, the entrance gaping like a wound. The sound came from inside, shallow, ragged breathing. I stepped closer. Dan. My voice trembled. It's me. We have to go, now. No answer. Just the sound of someone breathing too fast. My boots crunched softly as I edged inside. The air was thicker here, the walls slick with old condensation. And then I saw him crouched near the far wall, his back to me. He was shaking, shoulders twitching, like he was trying not to be sick. Dan, I said again, quieter this time. There's something down here. I saw it. It was wearing. I stopped. The words died in my throat. The light from my torch fell across his spine, and I realized the skin along his back was wrong. It wasn't sitting right. It was stretched, pulled too tight in some places, and torn in others, as though someone had peeled it away and tried to stitch it back on. His limbs looked too long, his shoulders too broad. His neck moved with a slow, jerky twist that didn't look human. Dan, I whispered. He turned. The face that looked back at me was wearing Dan's skin, but not like a mask, more like a costume that didn't fit. The mouth hung wrong. The eyes didn't blink. For a moment, it just stared at me, head tilted, as if curious how much of me it would need to wear next. Then it lunged. Chapter 4. The Escape. It moved faster than anything that Broken should have. 1 second, it was crouched in the dark. The next, it was all teeth and muscle and stolen skin, barreling straight toward me. I stumbled backward, my boots scraping over loose gravel, and the torchlight flashed across its face, a grotesque collage of flesh seams and blood. It screamed a sound that didn't belong in a human throat. Not rage, not pain, just raw existence tearing itself apart. I ran. The tunnel swallowed me whole again. My footsteps hit the ground in uneven bursts, the beam of my light jerking wildly against the walls. Behind me, I heard it crash into the corridor, its uneven gait pounding after me, a rhythm made of wet slaps and scraping bone. I didn't dare look back. Every breath was fire in my chest, every stride a prayer. Somewhere in the darkness, I thought I heard the radio again, that old wartime voice, repeating faint and broken enemy aircraft sighted. Brace for impact. The sound twisted with the creature's ragged screams until I couldn't tell one from the other. The tunnel began to curve, and far ahead, I saw it a thin, impossible slice of light. Daylight. I threw everything I had into reaching it. My legs burned, my lungs ached, and my vision blurred at the edges, but I didn't stop. The open air pulled at me like gravity. The creature was close. I could feel it, the air behind me, thickening the heat of it, pressing against my back. I hit the gate at full speed, my shoulder crashing into the chain link barrier. Metal rattled and screamed, and for a second I thought it wouldn't give. Then it did. The gate burst open, and I fell forward into the cold, bright morning. The light stabbed at my eyes. I scrambled to my feet, gasping hands raw from the ballast. I turned just in time to see the thing burst through the gate after me. The daylight hit it like acid. Its bare skin began to sizzle, blistering in seconds. Steam rose in thick clouds as it shrieked high and sharp, like metal grinding against metal. The flesh along its arms split open, folding away in sheets. The remnants of Dan's face peeled, drooping sideways, one eye sliding down its cheek like melting wax. It staggered backward, clawing at itself, trying to crawl back towards the tunnel's shadow. Every movement tore it further apart. By the time it reached the threshold, its body was little more than a twitching skeleton of tendons and blackened meat. It dragged itself inside into the dark that had made it. And then, nothing. Only the echo of its final scream fading into the depths. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. My chest heaved, my hands trembling so badly I could barely unclip the respirator. When I finally tore it off, the air felt freezing and thin, but cleaner than anything I'd breathed in hours. I fell against the side of a maintenance garage and just sat there, staring at the tunnel mouth. I should have left. I should have run until my legs gave out. But some part of me knew what I had to do. If I left that gate open, someone else would go in. So I got up. My legs shook like wet paper, but I forced them to move. I hauled the gate closed, every inch of it, crooning against the hinge. And when it finally clanged shut, I snapped the lock back into place. The sound echoed down the line like a gunshot. After that, I just sat for I don't know how long. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only emptiness behind. When I finally made it back to the main line, I told the site leads there'd been a collapse, that Dan was caught in it, buried too deep to recover, that the tunnel was unstable, too dangerous to enter again. They believed me. They always do. That night, I lay flat on my back, in bed, staring at the ceiling. I could still feel the weight of the darkness pressing against my skin. Still hear that faint voice on the radio repeating its ancient warning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dan, or what was left of him, turning to face me. My heart wouldn't stop racing. It didn't seem to understand that the danger was gone. Eventually, I gave up trying to sleep. I got up, turned on the TV, and started flipping through channels, anything loud enough to drown out my thoughts. I landed on a rerun of a featherweight fight, the one Dan had been talking about in the tunnel. I watched as the fighter ducked a hook and came back with a spinning elbow that dropped his opponent flat. The crowd roared. The commentators lost their minds. And for the first time that day, I almost smiled. Dan had been right. It was an absolute belter. But the smile didn't last. Because when the replay froze on the winner's face for just a split second, the lighting caught his eyes in a strange way. Pale, reflective, almost like something still watching me from the dark. I still dream about that tunnel sometimes. Not the screams, not the blood, just the quiet. The kind that feels too heavy to be empty. Every time I close my eyes, I see that thin strip of daylight at the end of the line. And something standing just beyond it, watching. They sealed the entrance for good this time, welded it shut, buried it under new stone and concrete. But I know the dark doesn't stay buried forever. It just waits for another door to open. If you ever find yourself near the old South Cut line and you hear static on the wind, walk away. And if you like this story, keep your lights low tonight, because sometimes the dark remembers who disturbed it.